Good morning. Welcome to Unlocking Value Realization using ADKAR and Force Field Analysis with Tim Creasy. I'm Christy Snow with Results Washington. My pronouns are she, her, and I will be your moderator today. We have about 700 attendees who have registered for this session, and we are so happy you're here. I'm joined today by Melissa Shaw, who will be providing ASL interpretation, and special thanks to my team member, Elisa Julius, who is managing technology behind the scenes. A few housekeeping things. We know many of you are familiar with Zoom meetings, but there are some differences in Zoom webinar, which is what we're using today. The biggest difference is you won't be able to talk or have your video visible. This ensures all participants can focus on the presentation. I want to draw your attention to a few different features in Zoom and how we'll use them. If you move your mouse, this toolbar will appear and you can see icons for the chat and the Q&A. And just be aware, these are two different features. Chat will be available for parts of the session during some exercises, so you'll see some chats coming through. And please keep in mind, this is a public record and we will not be monitoring that. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to pop those questions into the Q&A box. We won't be able to respond to all of them, but we will do our best to answer as many as we can. If you are experiencing any technical issues, please feel free to drop those in the Q&A box as well, and we will do our best to help you out with that. Next, you'll notice an icon for closed captioning. If you wish to see closed captioning, click that icon and select Show Subtitle, or you can view the full transcript. You can also adjust your view to make the presentation or the speaker larger by sliding the vertical bar on your screen from left to right. Session materials are available on our website, and videos will be available within a week. If we get disconnected or run into technical troubles, we will try our best to get the webinar back up within 5 minutes. And in the event we are unable to do so, we will record the session and post that to our website. Finally, at the end of the session, a survey will pop up. Please take the time to complete this survey. This does provide the presenter and us at Results Washington real-time feedback. We're very fortunate to have Tim Creasy here today. Tim is the Prosci Chief Innovation Officer and is a dynamic presenter, researcher, and thought leader on managing the people side of change initiatives to deliver organizational results and outcomes. He has advanced the discipline of change management from the soft and fuzzy toward a structured, rigorous approach for driving benefit realization and value creation. Tim also co-authored the book Change Management, The People Side of Change, and has led Prosci's benchmarking studies for the past 2 decades. So with that, I will pass over to you, Tim.
Very good. Thank you, Christy. And good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining us for this session on unlocking value realization using ADKAR and force field analysis. I am Tim Creasy, the Chief Innovation Officer here at Prosci, and my focus is helping people unlock the challenges of change by seeing them as conquerable. Because I think most of the time we have the answers within. It's how do we see that challenge is something we can conquer. And today we're going to use the 2 sides of the change coin and ADKAR to unlock change. Before we jump in, I do want to thank the entire Results Washington team. I presented a lot of these conferences, and they are one of the most professional, well-organized, clear, effective communicating team that I've ever got to work with. So thank you to the Results Washington team for all that they did to make this possible. So here is our agenda. We're going to look at the 2 sides of the change coin to better understand how the people side of change contributes to value realization. And then we're going to take the ADKAR model of individual change, marry it with a Lewin force field analysis, and put those together to see change as, again, something we can unlock and identify what we can do to remove barriers and advance change in the direction we're looking to achieve. I show you 2 sides of a coin because all change, like a coin, has 2 sides. There is a technical side of the coin and a people side of the coin. And we experience this in the projects we support all of the time, where we mapped the value stream perfectly. That's the technical side of the coin, but we still struggled to get engagement from the organization, the people side of the coin. We run a high impact 5S event only to return 30 days later to a total mess. The people side of the change coin was left to chance. We improved the flow of a key process, but when we come back, employees return to the old way of doing things. The people side of change and the technical side of change together deliver successful results and outcomes. And this is an equation from GE, Jack Welch's days. Even back then, he acknowledged that the effectiveness of the change was driven by both the quality, the technical side, and acceptance, the people side of the coin. And we started to frame this as the chasm that exists, because there's often a gap between requirements and results, between outputs and outcomes, between specifications and sustained improvement for the organization. And Daryl Connor, one of the grandfathers of change management, gave us the language, that gap between installation and realization. And the people side of change is how we close the gap. It's what stands between beautifully designed initiatives that could check the box on requirements, outputs, specifications, installation, but completely miss the mark in improving the organization in the way we need to. And I think Vince Lombardi, a famous American football coach of the Green Bay Packers, he said this one time: the achievements of an organization are the results of the combined effort of each individual. Now, he's talking about the Green Bay football team. And I was actually almost assaulted by a doctor who was a Minnesota Vikings fan, because you notice this is Minnesota Vikings purple with a Green Bay Packers legendary head coach quote on it. So sort of playing at a dangerous spot there. He's talking about a football team, but this is how our teams, our projects, our change initiatives, our organizations work. The achievement of what we set out to when we work to implement change is the combined result of each person. And so Prosci introduced the unified value proposition to really describe the two sides of the change coin. We describe change as this move out of a current through a transition to a future state. It's about stepping out of the way things are done today through a messy transition to ultimately arrive at a new way of doing things. Every change begins for a reason. It's over there on the left-hand side, the reason for change. It could be internal, it can be external, it could be a current state condition, it could be a future state goal. It's probably a mix of all of those things, but every change begins with a reason. Why are we putting the effort and energy into this initiative? Every change has a technical side where we design, develop, and deliver a technical solution that meets the issue or opportunity we have in front of us. And every single change needs a people side where the people are engaged, adopt, and use the solution that we bring forward. It's only when those two come together that we achieve success of the initiative. It is the quality times the acceptance. It is closing the gap between requirements and results. It's tending to both the technical and the people sides of change. This is the unified value proposition. I'm going to go ahead and chat this out to everybody. I have an article. If you want to learn more about the unified value proposition, there you go. You can open that up and save that for later. Now, we know that change is, beginning with the technical side. Notice I use technical, not technological, because there are technical solutions like a new value system that don't necessarily have technology behind them. A lot of process optimization is enabled and empowered by technology, but some may not be. That's still the technical side of the coin, even if it's not being powered by zeros and ones. There we go. The technical side then is executed by project management. It gives us the structure to manage the cost, time, scope trade-off for designing, developing, and delivering the solution. The people side then is the domain of change management, which is where Prosci and I spend all of my time. How do we bring structure and intent to helping our people navigate the change journey they will experience as a result of this change? And the lean discipline has brought in all sorts of tools and perspectives and ways to more effectively navigate the technical side. But the people side of change will still always be there. And that's what I want us to marry today, bringing together the technical and people sides. Now, certainly change isn't necessarily as sequential as it used to be. We're seeing all sorts of iterative change, whether it's continuous improvement or agile. But in the end, there will always be that technical and that people sides of change. I call this change on a page because I really think this is our opportunity to bring some clarity to how change might look. And so I would encourage you, grab a piece of paper if you have one nearby. If you're electronically inclined, go ahead and make a table. It's got 3 columns and 2 rows, but it's how we can start to visualize change on the page. Over on the left-hand side, we can capture those reasons for change. Where is the change coming from? Why? Why now? What if we don't? Why this particular change? Over on the right-hand side, we can capture our success. What about the organizational benefits, the project objectives? What are we trying to achieve with this initiative? At the top, we can begin to capture notes on how we're going to design, develop, and deliver the technical solution. And that's where we can start to document the tools out of the Lean Six Sigma approach that would help us more effectively design, develop, and deliver the technical solution. But at the bottom, we're going to talk about how we can engage, adopt, and use, how we will help our people, how we prepare, equip, and support them to bring the change to life in how they do their jobs. This is our first chance to engage with one another. If you grab your smartphone, if it's handy, you can also open up another browser window. Aim the browser to the URL you see at the top, pollev.com/Prosci. I'm going to chat that out as well, pollev.com/Prosci. And I'm curious, can you think of a change that you're working on where you could use this blank sheet on a page exercise to add clarity, where you can take the change that you've been working on and start to pull apart the reasons for change, the organizational benefits, the project objectives, the people side, well, the technical side, and the people side. Yeah, the first answers on the board are all change and every single one we do. I would agree. Decommissioning COVID-19 response, return to the office, resource management, data model development, our strategic planning effort, reopening counter services, organization structure. These are the types of changes that are going on in your organization every single day that have a technical side and a people side that we can bring clarity. And I love the fact that we can start to do it on a single page of paper. Downstream implications of amendments, systems changes, acquisitions, establishing a lean model line. Yeah, bringing lean into the organization is a change that we could put on a page this way. So change on a page, it's one of my favorite tools we have in the toolkit because we can do it on a blank piece of paper. I want to give you the questions that we would wrap around that change on a page. One of my favorite quotes right now is, "Answers have a shelf life, questions can last a lifetime." Conditions are changing so rapidly that as an agent of change, I think we can best equip ourselves with a great set of questions to ask and re-ask, because many of the answers need to be adjusted along the path. So here are the questions. What are the reasons, internal and external, current and future, for this change? Let's articulate those. What are the objectives of the effort? What does the effort achieve? What are the benefits of the solution? What does the organization, the department, the division gain? And how will we know if we're successful? And if you're all familiar with the putting measurements and Ruthlessly defining the problem we're trying to achieve is one of the most important steps in solving a problem. And that's what we're doing on this page. Above, we have how are we effectively designing, developing, and delivering the solution to meet that real or identified problem or opportunity. And at the bottom, how are we going to engage our people? How are you going to prepare, equip, and support our people so that they will sufficiently adopt and proficiently use the solution that we're bringing forward? That's how we drive successful change. And the bottom piece is really where our focus is as a firm at Prosci. Because what I'm putting on the screen now is a picture of side-by-side coins. On the left are incredibly high relief coins, and on the right are really rough coins. Now, if we think about the two sides of change, the technical side and the people side, all too often the technical side is refined to an incredibly high level of relief. Such incredible definition. And the people side of the change coin, we leave up to chance. The old email on Monday for training on Tuesday for we hope everything works out on Wednesday, when your entire world shifts in your work. The people side of change and the technical side of change both need to be tended to because it matters. When we think about the value a project delivers, project return on investment, sometimes the people side of change and the technical side of change are thought of as different return on investments. The reality is that the people side of change is capturing the ROI of change management is capturing that people dependent portion of project ROI. And at the bottom, you see some different examples. On the far left, you see a project with zero dependence on people changing how they show up each day. That would be a pure technology hygiene project that does not impact anyone's jobs. It's almost impossible to imagine, but it's purely technical in nature. As we move to the right, we get a higher percentage of project ROI that depends on people changing how they do their jobs. Over on the far right, that would be a cultural change where the entire value depends on people showing up in a new way. So I'm going to have you answer this question for me. Go back over to that smartphone or that browser window where you had pollev.com/prosci opened. If not, open it back up. Leave that browser window there. It'll refresh with each new question. The question this time is for your project. Think about the project you're working on right now. What percentage of the overall outcomes and results depends on employee adoption and usage of the change? I'm asking you to round to a 0 or a 5 and leave off that percentage sign. That's going to help our word cloud build. But even as you reflect on the question, you understand the punchline. Our most important projects have a significant dependence on adoption and usage, and we don't pay enough attention to that side of the coin. That's what change management is all about. The largest numbers that are showing up in the word cloud that is being built by you right now is 100, 90, 95, 99, 80. I don't know that I see a number less than 60. The people side of change is part and parcel to achieving what we set out to when we invest time and energy in making change happen. So not only does it help us capture the upside value, there is downside cost and risk when we ignore the people side of change. And what you see on this slide, and it is in the PDF of the slide so you can read it, because there are several hundred costs and risks when we ignore the people side of change. Things like attrition, delayed timelines, loss of productivity, not achieving the results we set out to, resistance, skepticism. These are the costs and risks when we don't get adoption and usage of our solutions. So grab your smartphone. It's probably still pulled up to that polling page, pollev.com/prosci. What are costs and risks of poor adoption and usage that you have experienced in the projects that you've supported? Maybe it was a project that you were a recipient of or a victim of, and you understood what it felt like when you were not supported throughout that initiative. Look at the words that are showing up on the screen, the word cloud you're building for us: wasted time, poor performance, morale, inefficiencies. disengagement, monetary costs. We fail to meet regulation. Regulatory compliance is at risk, turnover, and we are facing the great resignation where our people, most valued assets, are walking out the door. And how well we manage change impacts and will impact that great resignation. Frustration, disengagement, resistance. These are the costs and risks we can avoid if we get thoughtful about the people side of change. So here's a quote that the results and outcomes of workplace changes are intrinsically and inextricably tied to individual employees doing their jobs differently. And that's the intersection of the technical side and the people sides of change. So this discipline of change management, it helps us elevate the adoption challenges that are part of our initiatives. All of our initiatives will have project challenges and adoption challenges. Project challenges are getting the buttons to work, getting the process drawn right. Adoption challenges are getting people to bring the change to life and how they do their jobs. Change management encourages empathy. It helps us put ourselves into the shoes of the impacted employee and understand the change from their perspective so that we can engage them and engage their participation in the change journey, in the solution design, and being part of successful change. And ultimately, it's about empowering our people to take charge and unlock the challenges of change in front of them. So that's what this discipline is aimed at. And I'm going to offer us up 3 big questions that I think you can begin asking and answering to bring the people side of change into higher relief on the initiatives you support. Like I mentioned, answers have a shelf life. Questions can last a lifetime. So here's our first question. What is the nature of the change for you? For somebody who is being impacted by this initiative, have we added clarity of definition? We are implementing a new CRM system that is a fuzzy level of definition. It's going to have a medium impact on your job, or we can truly define the impact on somebody's job. And the Prosci methodology introduces the 10 aspects of change impact. How will this change impact your processes, your systems, your tools, your job roles, your critical behaviors, your mindsets, attitudes, beliefs, your reporting structure, your performance reviews, your compensation, or your location? And the change may or may not impact each of these 10 factors, but we begin to ask ourselves, for each impacted group, what is the magnitude and how does the change come to life in their day-to-day operations? If we're updating our expense reporting structure, an employee that files expense reports once a year will have very little to no impact. An employee that files expenses once a month will have a more significant impact. That employee who is managing accounting expenses, their entire job is flipped over on its head. These 10 job aspects help us to bring clarity to the definition of change impact. So jump over to your pollev.com/prosci, where you're helping us answer the question on a scale of 1 unclear to 5 very clear. How clearly do we typically see the individual change impact defined on our initiatives? I actually think this is a pretty interesting opportunity for the allyship between change management and the lean profession, because it's about adding granularity of definition and understanding so we can have impact. And in the end, that's what better understanding waste and processes. It's about the granularity of understanding so that we can impact it in a positive way. I see lots of 1s and 2s and 3s. Some of us are doing a better job. Here is a very simple way we can start to add this level of definition. I call this a yesterday, tomorrow exercise. And I do not mean November 3rd and November 5th. It means before the change and after the change, what was the impact to processes, to systems, to tools, to job roles? How are we, and in what ways are we impacting the way people do their jobs? So that was our first people side question, was what does the nature of the change for you impacted employee? The second question we ask is, what are the milestones of success on the people side of the change coin? And Jeff Hyatt, Prosci's founder, said this: "The secret to successful change lies beyond the visible and busy activities that surround change." Jeff had a master's degree in mechanical engineering from Rutgers. He was one of the most skilled process technicians you've ever met. But what Jeff said is successful change at its core is rooted in something much simpler: how to facilitate change with one person. And that's where Prosci and Jeff invented the ADKAR model. So I'm going to walk us through those 5 milestones of a successful individual change. The first milestone is awareness of the need for change. Not awareness that the change is happening, but awareness of the need for change. It's where I would personally internalize the answers to why now, what if we don't, and given today's saturated change environment, why this instead of that? If I can answer those questions, I would get to the point where I would say, I understand why. And that's the very first step of stepping into a change. Here's a story about ADKAR in the wild. That's a picture of my son Carter and I skiing at Brundage. Now we were at Bogus Basin here outside of Boise. We saw a skier without a helmet, and my son leaned over and said, "Oh my gosh, Dad, there's a skier without a helmet." And it struck me. I started to realize when I was a child skiing, you would lean over and say, "Oh, look at the one guy with a helmet." And it turns out it was the child whose dad was the neurologist in town. So we should have been paying attention. There were some significant moments over the last 20 years, some significant loss of life where the importance of wearing helmets during skiing became a critical conversation. Awareness was built around the importance of safety. And so now my son is surprised when he doesn't see somebody with a helmet on. Awareness of the need for change is the first building block. The second is desire to participate and support the change. It's the personal decision to step out of the current state and step into the transition state. And we all have free will. So we all will take the decision, but we can influence and nudge and encourage the decision. We can help people get to the "I have decided to" stage by working well on the "what's in it for me." That's the WIFM, what's in it for me, and highlighting the personal motivators and the organizational motivators that would cause them to go ahead and make this decision. Now, each of us are motivated by very different things, which is why change is so individual in nature. And here is an example of ADKAR, a desire in the wild. Each of these signs are encouraging you to fasten your safety belt, but they are tapping into different desires. The first one, buckle up, it could save your life. The second one, buckle up, it's the law. The third one, click it or ticket, minimum $142 fine. Different desire motivators being tapped into here: safety, authority, financial. And then I was driving up to our Prosci office a couple of years ago, and I saw a sign flash up that said, "Are you not wearing your safety belt? Seriously?" So now we're tapping into shame as a motivator to get people to fasten their safety belts. But desire is, what is it that would cause me to step into, to make the decision to step into this change? Awareness, desire. The third building block is knowledge. I know how to. Knowledge is unfortunately the default that we jump to. In times of change, what do? Send our people to training. Knowledge is necessary, but not sufficient. Knowledge needs to have awareness and desire, because the knowledge event that is not built on awareness and desire results in people sitting in the back of the room thinking about what they're going to have for dinner. So knowledge needs to be built on top of awareness and desire, and there's knowledge about what to do during and after the change. And we need to cater the knowledge based on how much knowledge the person needs at the time. So here's an interesting example of knowledge in the wild. These are, you might remember these early smartphones. When you would download an app, there would be a screen that would pop up the first time you started to use the app, and it would tell you instructions about how to navigate. You'll notice some of these instructions actually teach you how to swipe. Swiping on a phone is now second nature to even 1-year-olds. But early knowledge didn't exist on how to swipe and interact with that screen. So knowledge needs to show up based on how somebody's going to interact with the solution you're bringing to them. After knowledge comes ability. I am able to. This is where the change is actually taking shape. I am showing up in the new way. I am demonstrating the new skills and behaviors. I am following the new process, using the new system, using the new tool. That is ability, the demonstrated capability to do things the new way. Now, there is a knowledge ability gap. Each of us individually will have a different knowledge ability gap. We can envision an environment where electronic health records are being introduced into a healthcare environment. I might have some of my staff who have been on screens interacting with those touch screens the entirety of their lives. Might have other staff that are still carrying a flip phone and don't interact with technology. Those are different knowledge ability gaps for us to close when we step into bringing forth electronic health records. And we each can have barriers or capacity constraints that might inhibit our ability to execute particular changes. But in the end, if we want our people to successfully bring the change to life and how they do their jobs, we need to support them through ability. Here is a picture of ability in the wild. Those are my two boys, Carter and Benny. This is a long time ago because they are now moody teenagers, but that's us at a golf course. If you want to see the difference between knowledge and ability, you can go golfing with me one time. It only takes one hole because I know how to approach the ball. I know how to bend my knees. I know how far apart to keep my feet. I know I'm supposed to keep my head down. I know I'm supposed to keep my head down, but I have not fostered the ability to keep my head down. So off I go into the rough, the entirety of the hole. So ability is that demonstrated capability to show up in a new way. And I believe Prosci would be a complete failure as an organization if Jeff had invented the ADKAR model instead of the ADKAR model. If he had left off the R, reinforcement, which actually happens a lot of times in change, the model would not have worked. Because we know it's our natural, physiological, psychological tendency to go back to what we used to do. We know it is our tendency to regress and go back to what was known and what was comfortable. So if we want a change to stick, we need to be intentional about how to reinforce that change. What are we going to measure? How are we going to celebrate success? How are we going to help close gaps? So that's the final building block. And my story about reinforcement in the wild comes from one of our instructors, Phil Eastman. He had two boys. They were about 2 decades older than mine. So I got a lot of parenting advice from Phil. And I was getting ready to do a road trip. And every parent with young children knows the fear of a road trip. And so I was talking to Phil, how do I control the are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? And he said, here's what I did, Tim. I gave my boys 10 quarters each before we started the trip, and they got to hold them in their hands. And each time they said, are we there yet? They had to pass one coin to the front seat. He was positively reinforcing, don't ask, are we there yet? By providing those quarters that the child had to look at and hand forward when they decided to ask the question. So reinforcement helps us keep those behaviors in place. I put this in the slide deck so that you would have it as a handy reference. This is ADKAR on a page. So there are the 5 ADKAR elements, the definition, what we would hear if we achieve them. I understand why, I've decided to, I know how to, I'm able to, and I'll continue to. And then finally, those triggers that would help you move somebody forward. The powerful thing about ADKAR is it describes change at the individual level, but we can also use it to scale change at the organizational level. So when we have projects that impact 5 or 20 or 1,000 people, those projects succeed when each individual navigates A, D, K, A, and R. People also navigate ADKAR at different paces and start at different times. So now we have a lens to understand and customize our engagement approaches because we know how and when people may be navigating this journey. And we can really start to anchor those ADKAR milestones to our project timeline. On a technical project, we always know kickoff and outcomes and go live. The goal is, how do we align ability with go live? If I can get individuals to ability when I need them to do their jobs differently, that is the prerequisite of successful change. And from there, I can begin to back up about how I might build the knowledge, the desire, and the awareness, what I might do after go live to reinforce and prevent regression. But the unfortunate reality is, if we are not being thoughtful about the people side of the change coin, we do an email on Monday, for training on Tuesday, for go live on Wednesday, and wish and hope that the people side of change will come together. So this is about mapping those milestones and really aligning the people side of change to our schedules. We can align the people side of change to all sorts of approaches of implementing change in the organization. So a plan, do, checked, act cycle during the plan is really where we can start to build awareness of the need for change. During do, we actually have a desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement arc. During check, we kind of figure things out. And when we come back to act again, we have another knowledge, ability, reinforcement arc. So we can start to show ADKAR cyclically around PDCA. Six Sigma, we can start to map the ADKAR modules or milestones as well. The I improve in Six Sigma never happens if people don't change how they do their jobs. So awareness and desire can be built as we define and measure. Those measures are critical to building desire, the motivator to change. When we get to improve is where we see knowledge and ability and reinforcements there to ensure that we are able to control and sustain outcomes. And I can even start to map it into a lean value stream map, where awareness, desire, and then we start to get into cyclical knowledge, ability, reinforcement arcs as we find value, establish goals, seek perfection, and continue to roll the change forward. So ADKAR become those 5 milestones that we can use to help move our people through the change journeys they're facing. Which takes us to our third question. How can I enable change by amplifying drivers and reducing restraints? And we'll begin with Kurt Lewin. Go ahead and chat into the, well, no, sorry, I don't mean that. We don't need to chat because I know there's a lot of you on here. But think about it. Y'all, anybody know Kurt Lewin? Go ahead and nod. I'll pretend like I can see y'all nodding. All right, so Kurt Lewin, social psychologist, he gave us the notion of force field analysis, that anytime there's a change we're trying to make happen, there are driving forces that are going to try to encourage that change to happen, and there are restraining forces that will try to prohibit or inhibit that change from happening. And once we start to understand what's driving and what's restraining a change, we can amplify the drivers, start to mute the restrainers, reduce the restraining factors, and together we can get this change to work and move forward. So Kurt Lewin gave us this framework back in the 1940s. What we're going to do is really apply it within an ADKAR. Oops, let me get over. We're going to put it into play within an ADKAR framework. Slide 50 gives you just a snapshot of what the outcome could look like. We began hosting large-scale hackathons, crowdsourcing around the exercise we're about to do. And this is the example for excelling as a remote contributor. Back during the work from home experiment that began in March 2020, we brought a bunch of change practitioners and said, what are the restraining forces and what are the driving forces to help your employees excel as a remote contributor? So this gives you an idea of what the output could look like. During today's session, I'm going to encourage you to grab a blank sheet of paper, because one of the most powerful aspects of this exercise is we can do it on a blank sheet of paper anywhere. This is the way you might frame it up. If you're going to play along, I'd encourage you to. If you do play along and want to send me a snapshot of what you build, solutions@prosci.com. It'll go straight to me, only to satisfy my own curiosity. Don't send me one if you put any identifying information in there, but I'm curious to see how you might bring this framework to life. So ADKAR with our driving forces and our restraining forces. What drives awareness of the need for change? What would help somebody get to the point of saying, I understand why? Communication and access to information, events like town halls, observable conditions, personal internal vision or aspiration. There's a lot of things at play that we can use to help drive awareness of the need for change. But we also know that there are inhibitors of awareness: credibility of the source and sender, debate over the reasons, denial that the reasons are valid, rumors or misinformation. So the way you're going to do this exercise on your blank sheet of paper is begin by capturing one or two of those biggest restraining forces for the change you're thinking about. What are the one or two biggest restraining forces that would inhibit somebody from saying, I understand why this change is needed? Capture those on the right-hand side where you're keeping your restraining forces. And on the left-hand side, capture yourself one or two notes about how you might overcome those identified restraining forces. Awareness is helping our people get to say, I understand why. What's preventing them from saying, I understand why? And what might you do to help move that change forward and get them to the point of saying, I understand why? All right, so I'm hoping some of you are playing along and you've jotted a couple of notes about those restraining forces and driving forces. We're going to do the same thing for each of the ADKAR elements. And I'd encourage you, go ahead and start capturing notes. That's where it's going to get valuable. In terms of desire, what can restrain my desire to step into a change? Well, certainly comfort and security with how things are today. Maybe this change doesn't feel aligned with where I'm going. Maybe we have a negative history with change in this organization, and that's cast some shadow on how I'm engaging with the change in front of me. Certainly, my own personal situation will impact my desire to participate in this change at work. And we have seen that very blatantly over the last 20 months in response to a global pandemic, that what is going on at home will impact my desire for what's going on here. But what drives desire? Things like the likelihood of gain or achievement, the fear of staying where we are, that I want to belong and be part of a change that a lot of other people are part of, that I have ownership in the solution. And this is where participatory change and engaging our people and identifying and highlighting opportunities, challenges, and solutions is so powerful. So on your page, you're capturing some notes. What are the biggest restraining forces to desire? What are the biggest inhibitors of somebody saying, I've decided to? And how might we encourage, nudge, highlight the motivators, elevate the what's in it for them to help them get to that point of saying, I have decided to, because that's when they've gotten to the desire milestone. Here we go. The next one is knowledge. Knowledge is our third. Knowledge is the third building block. Like I mentioned, it's the default. It's the one that we typically just jump to, but it's necessary. It's necessary. It's just not sufficient, and it needs to come on the back of awareness and desire. So what are some of the restraining forces? What might inhibit knowledge? Insufficient time, inability to learn or remember. Maybe it's just too complex. Math Math is outside of what my knowledge container can hold. Inadequate resources, no access to the needed information. The fact that the conditions are continuing to change. It's not just-in-time training delivery. It's now become just-in-time requirement identification and just-in-time training development and just-in-time training delivery because of the rapid iterative nature of change today. So those are some of the things that might inhibit knowledge. What might you do to drive knowledge? Training, education, experience, access to information, mentorship. This is where gamification, the ability to watch experts do their jobs. I've written a whole paper about Fortnite because my boys were into Fortnite. And I wrote a paper about exponential experiential learning, right? This is how we can bring knowledge to our people when we start to understand what's inhibiting or restraining and how we might drive knowledge. So if you're playing along on your page, hopefully you've jotted a couple of notes down around what are the biggest restraining factors that you need to take into consideration and how might you overcome them. After awareness, desire, knowledge comes ability. That's the demonstrated capability to show up in the new way that's needed. Whether it's the processes, systems, tools, job roles, critical behaviors, mindsets. Ability is when I can step into that role. Now, there's some things that can inhibit ability, right? Psychological blocks. Confidence is a huge ability barrier for many of our senior leaders stepping into the role as sponsorship, as an example. We might have limitations in our own physical abilities to execute a particular change. My intellectual capacity, capability, time available. Changes might just, all of a sudden a meeting gets moved to 8:30 and I've dropping my kid off at 8:15 every day at school now. So that is an ability barrier that's just sheerly part of a limitation that I need to try to figure out how to overcome. There are driving forces, though. If we're helping people to enhance and build that ability, things like practice and role models and examples, access to the right tools, safe environments to experiment and play with those tools, feedback, time, all of us will take time to refine the ability to show up in a new way. So you're thinking about your particular change on your blank piece of paper. What are some of those biggest restraining factors, forces, and what are some of those biggest driving forces? That takes us to our final building block, reinforcement to sustain the change. Because we know it is predictable to go back to what was if we are not intentional about keeping what we've created. So there are restraining forces around reinforcement, like rewards that are not meaningful or associated with achievement, participation trophies, or baseball tickets for me, because I could care less about baseball. Those are not meaningful reinforcements. The absence of reinforcement or accomplishment, or negative consequences, peer pressure, misalignment with my incentives is a huge negative reinforcer. If you're asking me to do something faster, but you incent me to do it right, those can be at odds. There are driving forces, though, things like celebration, reward, recognition, feedback. We can get incredibly thoughtful and intentional about how to drive reinforcement once we start to be intentional about it. I'll share with you the two words that I think are the most important in reinforcing change: thank and you. Individual human beings are bringing so much of themselves every single day. And when they step into this change and they put in the energy to go ahead and try a new thing, make sure we let them know that it mattered. So there are your ADKAR force field analysis. ADKAR, the 5 building blocks of individual change, and how we can start to unpack what is inhibiting the change from going forward and what might we do to amplify and help our people move forward. We can do it at a project initiative level, which is sort of how we did the exercise right now. But I think these statements are also interesting to turn at an individual level as well. Maybe it's a change I'm trying to make at home. And I can start to be reflective about what do I need to be able to say I understand why, and what's stopping me from saying I understand why. What do I really need to be able to say I've decided to? And what is it that's stopping me from saying I've decided to? So that's how we take ADKAR, put it together with force fields to unlock the challenges of change. I give you a couple of examples here. One of them is that blank sheet. That's what we just did on a blank piece of paper. The other is an actual canvas where you can go in and type in. It's a fillable tool that you could use to capture your thoughts or facilitate the conversation with others. So there it is. The people side of change matters. And this discipline of change management, especially if we can marry it with the work you're already doing to improve the performance of the organization, it helps us elevate those adoption challenges, encourage empathy, engage participation, and ultimately empower our people. Because in the end, change comes to life one person at a time in the organization. And it is how well we can define what that change impact means to those individual people and how well we can support them through their individual change journeys that ultimately drive change success and change outcomes. Thank you so much for engaging with me throughout today's session. I think Christy's going to join us, and we've got 7 minutes, it looks like, for some questions and comments as they might come in.
Yes, thank you so much, Tim, for talking about change management and shining light on the importance. There was a question that came in when you were talking about force field analysis. What if the restraining forces of change are external and beyond our control?
Yeah, great question. And I think that example at the end, right, of I have drop my son off at 8:15 and I have an 8:30 meeting that I can't make it to. So sometimes those barriers are external. One of my favorite phrases, it's an alignment hack that I've been building over the last year, is name it to tame it. Name it to tame it. So we at least now can spot and identify an ability barrier as an ability barrier that might be immovable. And now we can talk about how we might address and adapt to that barrier. But if we can't name it and spot it as the barrier that's preventing me from moving forward, we run the risk of throwing the wrong solution at what is actually keeping that person from being able to step into what we need them to step into.
Awesome. There's been a few questions in here asking if any of the tools that you covered would be available to the participants.
Yes, Christy, I'm going to chat in. I chatted in the force field analysis. I'm going to chat in one other around defining change impact, and that's going to give you a pathway to get to that yesterday tomorrow tool. Because I'll tell you what, I think it's a very simple tool, right? It's 11 rows and 2 columns. But it's probably one of the most impactful tools we find in terms of bringing that level of definition. So I chatted in the defining change impact, and Christy, I'll work with you to get a copy of the fillable one that we can get out to this group.
Okay, awesome. Yeah.
I actually have a 90-minute webinar where you go into 10 different ways to use force field analysis with either executives or practitioners, all different ways, but I'll figure out a way to get people more information on that too.
Okay, that's awesome. And so we'll be able to post that on our website with the rest of the materials for your session. And then, so we've got time for about one more question. So thinking about the need for individual change, what are some ideas for finding the balance between what is required of team leaders and managers and supervisors and what is needed from the team, both individually and collectively?
Yeah, I think one of the ways we talk about this is the idea of the enabling roles versus the employee-facing roles. And I love that the person asked in the question about our frontline people managers, because they're one of the most critical employee-facing roles that's often overlooked and neglected in times of change. And so it's very much, do you remember business travel? I used to travel for my job. I don't know the last time I've been to an airport now, but they always had that thing that if the oxygen masks come out of the roof, you put yours on first before you help the person next to you. And Christy, I think what as change teams, what we can do is start to realize and really treat our people managers as those critical allies. We can start to build change muscle in the organization so that it's able to be deployed both on purpose and by intent and in response to the conditions that come and may come out of nowhere. And I think that change muscle is how we respond to the stuff that we can't anticipate coming.
Change muscle. I like that. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tim. This has been an amazing session. I know I've learned stuff, and I'm sure others are going to take things away that they can utilize as well. And thank you to all of you for attending today's session. This is the last day of the Lean conference, but we do have a few more sessions to go. So go ahead and visit our website. You can revisit old sessions or check out the materials or sign up for the remaining sessions that we have this week. So thank you all so much. In a second, you will get a survey that pops up. Please take the time to complete that survey so that we can get your real-time feedback. Thank you all so much and have a great day.